You may be in the middle of a storm right now. Maybe it's a storm of your emotions, a storm in your relationships, or even a financial storm that feels like it's swallowing you whole. You're struggling and you're wondering, where is God in all of this? How could a good God, a loving Father, allow such things to happen? It's a question that every believer, at one time or another, asks in the heat of their trials. But I want to tell you something very powerful today. God is working. Even in the midst of your storm, even when the wind howls and the waves crash against you, God is moving in ways you can't yet see. The Bible tells us that God works in mysterious ways, and though we may not understand it, His ways are always good. And sometimes the storms of life are the very things He uses to refine us. I know that may sound strange, but it's true. You see, God is not only present when things are going well, He's not just with you when the sun is shining and everything is peaceful. No, He is with you in the storm. In fact, He may be doing some of His most important work in your life right now, even if you can't feel it or see it. I'm here to tell you, He has not abandoned you, even in the fiercest winds. In fact, He may be preparing you for something far greater than you could ever imagine. But the key to experiencing the fullness of what He's doing lies in trusting Him, even when everything around you says to give up. When you're in the storm, it can be incredibly difficult to see beyond the waves, to hear anything above the noise, to feel any peace at all. Much to feel any peace. The storm can seem all-consuming. It's easy to wonder, why is this happening to me? But the truth is, God's purpose for you does not change because of your circumstances. God is still God in the storm, just as much as He is God on the mountaintop. And the beauty of it is, the storm does not last forever. But while you're in it, while it's raging around you, you are not helpless. God is at work, moving behind the scenes, doing something in your heart that only this storm could accomplish. This is not just wishful thinking. This is what the Word of God teaches us. In Romans 8:28, it says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Let that sink in for a moment. In all things, not just in the good things, not just in the easy seasons, but in all things. The trials, the pain, the moments when you feel like you can't go on, God is working even in those. It's easy to forget that in the midst of a storm, but it's the truth. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you were completely dependent on God? Maybe you've been there, feeling like your back was against the wall, and you didn't know how you were going to get through it. Maybe you faced something so overwhelming that you felt powerless. You felt powerless. But in those moments, it's often in that place of total surrender that God shows up in the most powerful ways. It's in the moments when we've lost control, when we've exhausted all our options, that God steps in to remind us that He is in control. And He's not just in control of the big things. He's in control of every single detail of your life. Think of the disciples on the boat in the storm. The Bible tells us that Jesus was with them in the boat, but they couldn't see Him clearly in the midst of the storm. All they could see was the chaos around them. They feared for their lives, and they cried out to Him. And Jesus, who was right there with them the whole time, calmed the storm with a word. He didn't need to be somewhere else to calm the wind. He was already present, and He had the authority over it all. What's amazing is that He was with them in the storm. Not when it was over, not after they had passed through it, but in the storm. Jesus is present in your storm too. He hasn't left you. He's right there, and just like He calmed the wind for the disciples, He can calm the storm in your life. But how do you trust Him when the waves are crashing, when the winds are howling? The answer, my friend, is found in faith. Trust is an act of faith. It's knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that God has a plan even when you can't see it. It's choosing to believe His promises even when the circumstances scream the opposite. When you trust God, you choose to believe that He is working even when you can't see it. You choose to rest in the truth that He has not forsaken you, even when the storm feels like it might swallow you whole. I'm not telling you that it's easy. Trusting God in the storm is hard. There are times when you'll feel afraid, times when you'll feel overwhelmed, and times when you'll question how you'll ever make it through. But here's the thing. God does His best work in the midst of your weakness. When you're at your lowest, He is at His highest. When you're sinking, He reaches down and pulls you up. When you feel like you're drowning in doubt, He whispers peace to your heart. So how do we navigate the storm with trust? We do it by remembering the faithfulness of God. We do it by looking back on His track record in our lives, remembering the times when He showed up, when He provided, when He carried us through. And we also do it by looking forward, trusting that God has a good plan for our lives, even when we can't see the outcome right now. The key is to take one step at a time, trusting Him for the next step, not worrying about the next day or the next hour, but trusting Him in the present moment. God is at work in ways you can't even imagine. His timing is perfect. His plans are perfect. And as you walk through this storm, know that you are not alone. He is walking with you, and when the storm is over, you will look back and see how He has carried you through. Your faith will be stronger. Your hope will be renewed. And you will have a testimony to share with others about the faithfulness of God in the storm. Trust Him today, friend. He is working even now behind the scenes. Keep your eyes on Him and trust His perfect plan. The storm will pass and you will come out of it victorious, with your faith more firmly anchored than ever before. Now let's dive deeper into why trusting God in the midst of your storm is not only important, but absolutely necessary for your journey. You see, one of the greatest challenges we face as believers is the temptation to rely on our own strength, our own wisdom, and our own abilities when the storm clouds roll in. It's only natural to want to grab hold of what we can control when things feel chaotic. The problem is, this is not God's way. Trusting Him isn't just about accepting that He's there. It's about letting go of our own attempts to fix everything and submitting to His greater plan. In our human nature, when we face difficulty, we often want an immediate solution. We want to escape the discomfort, the pain, or the confusion as quickly as possible. But God doesn't always work on our timeline. We want a quick answer, but God's timing is always perfect. He doesn't work in the way we expect because His ways are far higher than ours. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us of this truth. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. When we try to control our circumstances, we often miss the deeper lessons that God is trying to teach us. In the storm, God is often molding our hearts. He's refining us. He's working on our character. He's teaching us patience, endurance, humility, and trust. If we rush through the storm, trying to avoid the process, we might miss the spiritual transformation that is taking place. There is a powerful example of this in the Bible with the story of Joseph. Joseph was a man who experienced incredible storms in his life. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. But in all of these trials, Joseph continued to trust in God. He didn't understand why all of this was happening to him, but he knew that God was still with him. And eventually, God used Joseph in a mighty way, saving many lives through his leadership during a time of famine. Joseph's life shows us something very important. Sometimes the storms we go through are necessary to prepare us for something greater. God uses the storms not to destroy us, but to build us up. His goal is always to strengthen our faith, to deepen our trust in Him, and to draw us closer to His heart. And as we learn to trust Him in the storm, we become more resilient, more steadfast, and more able to stand firm in our faith. But here's the question. How do we trust God when we don't see the end of the storm? How do we keep our faith strong when the winds are howling, the waves are crashing, and everything inside of us wants to give up? The answer, my friend, is that trust is a choice. It's a choice that we make every single day, often in the face of overwhelming circumstances. Trusting God doesn't come easily. It's not a one-time decision. It's a daily choice to surrender our will to God's will. It's saying to God, I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that you are in control. I trust that you are good, and I believe that you are working in my life, even when I can't see it. You may wonder, but how do I know God is working? How can I be sure that He hasn't abandoned me? The truth is, there are times when we may not feel God's presence. There are moments when it seems like He's distant, or when we feel completely alone. Oh, but that's where faith comes in. We trust not because of how we feel, but because of what we know to be true. We know that God's word promises that He will never leave us or forsake us. We know that He is always working, even when we can't see the evidence. The Apostle Paul reminds us in 2 Corinthians 5:7 that we walk by faith, not by sight. It's a reminder that our trust is not based on our circumstances, but on the character of God Himself. One of the greatest lessons we learn in the storm is how to lean on God's strength instead of our own. We come face to face with our limitations, with our inability to control everything. And in that place of weakness, God's power is made perfect. The Apostle Paul speaks about this in 2 Corinthians 12:9, where God tells him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." When we are weak, God shows Himself strong. And in those moments when we feel like we can't take one more step, God gives us the strength to press on. It's also important to understand that trusting God in the storm is not about denying the pain or pretending that everything is okay when it's not. It's about acknowledging the reality of the storm, but choosing to place our trust in the one who is greater than the storm. God is not asking you to pretend like everything is fine when it's not. He's asking you to trust Him even when it feels impossible. He's asking you to let go of your fear and your anxiety and place it into His hands. And He promises that as you do that, He will give you peace that surpasses all understanding, Philippians 4:7. You see, trust is an act of surrender. It's letting go of our own attempts to control the situation and acknowledging that God is in control. He may not always take us out of the storm, but He will always walk with us through it. He will never leave us to face it alone. As we trust Him, He strengthens our faith, deepens our relationship with Him, and gives us the peace that we need to face whatever comes our way. The storm you're in may feel overwhelming, but it is not the end of the story. God is at work behind the scenes, and He is using this season of struggle to shape you into the person He has called you to be. Your faith will be stronger for having gone through it. You will come out of this storm not as a defeated person, but as a person who has experienced the faithfulness of God in the midst of the hardest trials. And as you emerge from this storm, you will have a testimony to share of how God was with you every step of the way. In the storm, God is working. He's working in your heart. He's working in your life. And as you trust Him, you will see the fruit of that trust in your life, both now and in the days to come. So hold on tight, my friend. Keep trusting, keep believing, because God is faithful, and He will never let you go. In our lives, there are times when the storms feel relentless, when the waves of worry, fear, and uncertainty crash over us, and it seems like there's no end in sight. It's easy in those moments to lose heart, to question if God is truly at work, and to wonder why the storm isn't ending. But let me remind you of this. The storm doesn't define you. Your circumstances don't determine your future. What defines you is your trust in God. Though the storm may rage, God's power is greater than anything you face. As we walk through these trials, we often find ourselves asking why. God, why am I going through this? And it's understandable. We are human and we long for relief, for answers, for peace. But sometimes we need to realize that the purpose of the storm is not always for us to understand it in the moment. Rather, it's about God's purpose being fulfilled in our lives. It's about His refining process. It's about our faith being deepened and strengthened. Consider the story of the Apostle Paul. Paul, a man who faced countless trials and hardships, from beatings to imprisonment to shipwrecks, understood something very profound about trusting God in the midst of a storm. In his second letter to the Corinthians, Paul shares a powerful testimony about a thorn in the flesh that he endured, a difficulty that he prayed for God to remove, but God didn't remove it. Instead, God told Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. Paul's response was striking. He said, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." What an amazing perspective. Paul didn't resent the storm. He didn't try to escape the difficulty. He embraced it, knowing that in his weakness, God's power would be displayed in ways he could never have imagined. This is a truth we must hold on to in our own storms. When the winds howl, when the rain falls relentlessly, and when it feels like the storm will never end, we must remember that God is at work. He's doing something deeper in us. He's building our character, fortifying our faith, and drawing us closer to Himself. God doesn't waste our pain. He uses it to grow us. He uses it to mold us into the image of Christ, and He uses it to make us stronger than we ever thought possible. But how do we walk through the storm without losing hope? How do we trust God when everything around us seems to be falling apart? First and foremost, we must remind ourselves of God's promises. The Bible is filled with promises from God to His people. Promises that assure us that we are not alone, that He will never leave us nor forsake us. One of the most powerful promises is found in Isaiah 43:2, where God says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." That's a promise worth holding on to, my friend. When the waters rise and the flames burn, God is with you. He's walking through the storm with you. You are not facing this battle alone. God's presence is there, even when you don't feel it. Even when the storm feels overwhelming, God is holding you in His hands. He is with you in the middle of it, and He is working in ways you cannot see. Another way to trust God in the storm is to remember that He has a purpose for everything that happens. Nothing in your life is a coincidence. Everything that comes your way has been allowed by God. That doesn't mean He causes the pain or the difficulty, but it does mean that He can use it for His glory and your good. Romans 8:28 reminds us of this truth. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Even in the storm, God is working. He is using the circumstances of your life to shape you, to teach you, and to draw you closer to Him. When we trust in God's sovereignty, we begin to see our trials through a different lens. We don't see them as punishments or as evidence of God's absence. Instead, we see them as opportunities for God to reveal His power and His faithfulness. We see them as opportunities for growth, for learning to rely more fully on God, and for experiencing His presence in a deeper way. But trusting God in the storm doesn't mean we simply passively endure the hardship. It means we actively lean into Him. We seek Him in prayer, pour out our hearts to Him, and ask Him to give us the strength we need to endure. It means we immerse ourselves in His Word, finding comfort and hope in the promises He has made to us. It means we surround ourselves with fellow believers who can encourage us, pray with us, and remind us of God's truth when we can't see it ourselves. Trusting God in the storm means choosing to look beyond our circumstances and set our eyes on the one who is greater than any storm. One of the most powerful ways to trust God is through worship. In the midst of our trials, when everything inside of us wants to complain or give up, worship has the power to change our hearts. Worship reminds us of who God is and what He has done for us. It shifts our focus from the problem to the provider. It helps us remember that God is bigger than any storm and His love for us is unshakable. When we worship, we acknowledge God's sovereignty, His goodness, and His faithfulness. Worship is a declaration that no matter what we are facing, we trust God. We trust that He is working, that He is faithful, and that He is good. And remember this, the storm will not last forever. Every trial has an end. Every season of difficulty will eventually pass. But the strength and the character that God builds in you through the storm will last for eternity. When you come through this trial, you will be stronger, your faith will be deeper, and you will have a testimony of God's faithfulness that will encourage others who are going through their own storms. The storm is not the end of your story. It's just a chapter. And in the end, God will use it for His glory and your good. So trust Him. Hold on to His promises, seek His presence, and know that He is working even when you can't see it. God is faithful and He will never let you go. When you're in the midst of a storm, it's easy to feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. The clouds may seem too dark to break through, and the winds may be howling so loudly that you wonder if the storm will ever end. It's natural to want relief, to pray for the storm to pass, to cry out to God for answers. But often in the midst of the storm, it's difficult to see what God is doing behind the scenes. We may not feel His presence, we may not hear His voice, and we may wonder why God seems silent. But let me remind you of something crucial. God is working even when you can't see it. There's a famous story in the Bible, one that many of us are familiar with, about the disciples caught in a storm while they were in a boat. In the Gospel of Matthew, we read about how Jesus had sent the disciples ahead of Him across the Sea of Galilee, while He stayed behind to pray. As they were out on the water, a violent storm arose, and the disciples found them struggling to keep the boat afloat. The storm was so fierce that it filled the boat with water, and the disciples were terrified. They didn't know what to do, and they were convinced that they were going to perish. But then, in the midst of their panic and fear, they saw something that changed everything. They saw Jesus walking on the water toward them. At first they were afraid, thinking that they were seeing a ghost. But then Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter, one of the disciples, asked if he could come to Jesus on the water, and Jesus invited him to step out of the boat. Peter stepped out, but when he saw the wind and the waves, he became afraid and began to sink. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Matthew 14:22-33. Now let's pause and reflect on this story for a moment. Here were the disciples caught in the middle of a fierce storm, terrified for their lives. They thought they were alone, and they thought there was no way out. But Jesus was already on his way to them. He was walking toward them across the stormy sea, showing them that no matter how intense the storm was, he was in control. Jesus didn't wait for the storm to calm down before he made his way to them. He came to them right in the midst of the storm. And when Peter stepped out in faith, Jesus was there to catch him when he began to sink. This story is a powerful reminder for all of us in the middle of our own storms. It's easy to feel abandoned when the waves are crashing around us and the wind is howling in our faces. We may feel like God is far away or that he's forgotten about us. But the truth is, God is closer than we think. He's right there with us, walking toward us in the midst of the storm. Just as Jesus came to the disciples on the water, he is coming to you in your storm. You may not see him, but he is present. He is working, even when you can't see it. And when you call out to him in faith, he will reach out his hand and catch you, just as he caught Peter. It's also important to notice something else in this story. Jesus didn't immediately calm the storm. He didn't instantly make everything better. Instead, he allowed the storm to continue, but he was right there with them in the storm. Sometimes in our own lives, we may pray for God to remove the storm, to make everything go away, to fix our problems. But God often works differently. He doesn't always take away the storm. Instead, he strengthens us through the storm. He teaches us to trust him more fully, to lean on him more completely, and to rely on his power rather than our own. The storm may not disappear immediately, but God's presence is the assurance that we will not be overwhelmed. So, how can we trust God when the storm is raging? How can we have faith in God's presence when everything around us feels uncertain and unstable? The first thing we must do is recognize that God is present, even in the midst of our struggles. When we feel abandoned, when we feel alone, we must remind ourselves that God is near. He has promised to never leave us nor forsake us. Deuteronomy 31:6. Even in the darkest moments, when we can't see his hand, we can trust his heart. God's love for us is unwavering, and his faithfulness is constant. He will never let go of us. The second thing we must do is to keep our eyes on Jesus. In the story of Peter walking on the water, the moment Peter took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. When we focus on the storm senses, the fears, the worries, we begin to lose our faith. We begin to sink into despair. But when we keep our eyes on Jesus, when we focus on his power and his promises, we can walk through the storm with confidence. Jesus is the one who has authority over the wind and the waves. He is the one who calms the storms of our lives. And when we trust him, we will not be overwhelmed. Third, we must learn to surrender our fear to God. Fear is one of the greatest obstacles to trusting God in the storm. Fear tells us that we're alone, that we're not safe, that we won't make it through. But God calls us to surrender our fear to him. He says, "Do not fear, for I am with you." Isaiah 41:10. When we surrender our fear to God, we allow him to replace our anxiety with peace. We allow his perfect love to cast out fear, 1 John 4:18. The storm may still rage, but God's peace will guard our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus, Philippians 4:7. Finally, we must remember that God's timing is perfect. In the story of the disciples on the boat, Jesus didn't come to them right away. He waited until they were in the middle of the storm before he appeared. Sometimes God's timing doesn't match our own. We want relief now. We want the storm to stop, the pain to end, the struggle to be over. But God's timing is always perfect. He knows when to show up. He knows when to step into our situation, and He knows how to use the storm for our good. We must trust that He is working, even when we can't see it. His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, Isaiah 55:9. As we walk through the storms of life, let us hold on to the truth that God is with us, that He is working, and that He is faithful. The storm may feel overwhelming, but we are never alone. God is walking with us, and He will never let us go. He is the God who calms the storms, who brings peace in the chaos, and who strengthens us through every trial. Trust Him even in the storm, and you will see His power at work in your life. When you find yourself in the midst of a storm, it's easy to forget the bigger picture. The pain, the confusion, the turmoil can cloud your vision, making it difficult to see past your circumstances. But in those moments, it's essential to remember one fundamental truth. God is not surprised by the storm you're facing. He is not caught off guard by the waves that crash against you. In fact, He knew you would face this storm long before you ever did, and He has already gone before you to prepare the way. This is where trust becomes key. Trust that God is not only with you, but that He is working all things for your good, even in the midst of your trial. You may wonder how that can be true when you feel overwhelmed by your situation. You might ask yourself, how can God be working in my life when everything around me seems to be falling apart? That is a natural question to ask, and it's one that many of us struggle with at some point in our lives. But the truth is, God's ways are not like ours. His perspective is not limited by time, space, or circumstance. While we are trapped in the moment, God sees the end from the beginning. And this is where our faith must rise above what we see with our physical eyes. We must trust in what we know to be true about God, His character, His promises, and His faithfulness, rather than allowing our current circumstances to dictate our faith. The Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 8:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Notice that Paul didn't say all things are good. He didn't say that our trials and storms are pleasant or easy. No, he said that in all things, good or bad, God is working for our good. This is a promise for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. It's not always easy to understand, especially when we're going through pain and suffering, but it's a truth that we must hold on to in the storm. The storm you are facing right now, no matter how overwhelming it may seem, is not without purpose. God is using it to shape you, to refine you, to grow your faith. We may not understand the reason behind the struggle, but we can trust that God is using it for something greater. He is the master of turning trials into triumphs, and He is always at work behind the scenes. Even when we can't see it, He is orchestrating things in our favor. One of the hardest parts of trusting God in a storm is surrendering our desire for control. We want to fix things, to make the storm go away, to take charge of our situation. But God is calling us to trust Him fully, to let go of our need to control the outcome. This doesn't mean that we sit idly by and do nothing, but it means that we trust God's timing, His wisdom, and His plan for our lives. It means that we submit ourselves to His will, even when we don't understand it. In the book of Isaiah, God tells us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, my ways." Isaiah 55. A reminder that God's plan is always higher and better than anything we could ever imagine for ourselves. The storm may seem unbearable, but God has a purpose in it that we may not yet see. Trusting Him means acknowledging that His ways are higher than our own, and that He is leading us through the storm for a reason. This kind of trust is not passive, it is active and requires courage. It's easy to trust God when things are going well, when everything is smooth sailing. But it's when the storm hits that our faith is truly tested. Will we choose to trust God in the middle of the struggle, or will we let fear and doubt take over? The Bible encourages us to hold fast to God's promises, to remember that He is faithful, and that He will never leave us or forsake us. Deuteronomy 31:6. No matter how strong the winds blow or how high the waves rise, God is with us. He is not distant or indifferent to our pain. He is right there in the storm, walking with us through the fire, just as he was with the 3 Hebrew men in the fiery furnace. Daniel 3:25. I know it can be hard to believe that God is working for our good when we are in the midst of pain. It's easy to think that God is punishing us, or that he has forgotten about us, but that is simply not true. God does not punish his children in the way that we sometimes think. His heart is always for us, and he desires for us to grow and mature in our faith. He allows us to go through storms not because he is angry with us, but because he wants to build our character, to refine our faith, and to draw us closer to him. James 1:2-4 tells us, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Trials and storms are opportunities for us to grow in faith and endurance. They are part of God's process to make us more like Christ. And while we may not enjoy the process, we can trust that God is using it for our good and his glory. The key to trusting God in the midst of the storm is remembering that he is working for our good, even when we can't see it. When we face trials, it's easy to become discouraged, to feel like we're being punished or abandoned. But God has a greater purpose in mind, and he is using this time to shape us, refine us, and prepare us for something greater. Our job is to trust him, to rely on his strength, and to wait on his timing. We may not know when the storm will end, but we can trust that God is with us through it all. Through it all. When we allow God to work in our lives, when we surrender to his will and trust in his goodness, we will emerge from the storm stronger, wiser, and more equipped to face whatever comes next. The storm will pass, but the lessons learned and the growth experienced will remain. And in the end, we will see that God was with us all along, working all things for our good in his glory. So in the midst of your storm, take a moment to remember that God is not absent. He is present, working behind the scenes, and he is leading you through this trial. Trust him even when you don't understand. Lean on him even when you can't see the way forward. And know that he is faithful to bring you through the storm, stronger and more rooted in his love than ever before. When you're in the midst of a storm, it feels as though the whole world is against you. Every step forward seems like you're walking through quicksand, and every move you make is met with resistance. You may feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and completely lost. But in these moments of desperation, God is calling you to look beyond the storm and trust in his purpose for your life. Even when you can't see it, he is working behind the scenes, orchestrating every detail of your situation for a greater purpose. And while it may feel impossible to trust him when everything around you is falling apart, this is exactly when you need to place your faith in him more than ever. There's a very real battle taking place in the spiritual realm that we often don't see with our physical eyes. The enemy would love nothing more than to convince you that God has abandoned you, that your struggle is pointless, and that there is no hope for the future. But that's a lie. The truth is, God has a plan, and he is using every moment of your storm to shape you and mold you into the person he created you to be. God is not punishing you. He is refining you. Just as gold is refined in the fire, your faith is being tested and purified through the challenges you face. The Apostle Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 4-17, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." When we are in the middle of a storm, it's difficult to see the bigger picture. We can't fully grasp the eternal significance of the trials we're enduring. But God, in his infinite wisdom, sees the end from the beginning. He knows exactly how this storm will shape you, and he is using it to prepare you for something greater. While you may be focused on the pain and the struggle, God is focused on the eternal glory that will be revealed through it. This is where the power of trust comes in. It's easy to trust God when everything is going smoothly, when life is calm and peaceful. But it's in the midst of the storm that our faith is truly tested. Will we trust God when the winds are howling and the waves are crashing around us? Will we trust him when we don't understand why we're going through this pain? It's in these moments that we must choose to trust God, not because we can see the way forward, but because we know he is good and he is faithful. One of the most powerful examples of trusting God in the storm comes from the story of Jesus and his disciples in the Gospel of Mark. In Mark 4:35-41, we read that Jesus and his disciples were crossing a lake when a fierce storm arose. The disciples were terrified, and they woke Jesus, saying, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? But Jesus, who was asleep in the boat, calmly got up and rebuked the wind and the waves, saying, Quiet! Be still! And immediately the storm subsided. Jesus then turned to his disciples and asked, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? The disciples were amazed and asked one another, Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. This story is a beautiful reminder that even in the midst of the fiercest storm, Jesus is in control. The disciples had every reason to be afraid. The storm was violent, the boat was sinking, and they were in real danger. But Jesus, who was with them the entire time, calmed the storm with a word. He didn't panic. He didn't run. He simply spoke and the storm obeyed, and then he turned to his disciples and challenged them to trust him. In the same way, God is with you in the storm. He is not distant or indifferent to your pain. He is right there with you, speaking peace over your life. It's easy to look at our circumstances and feel overwhelmed, but we must remember that God is greater than any storm we face. No matter how fierce the winds or how high the waves, God is with us and he is in control. The storm may seem like it's raging out of control, but God is always present, always working, always sovereign. And just as Jesus calmed the storm with a word, he can bring peace to your heart in the midst of your trial. He can bring calm to your soul, even when everything around you seems chaotic. The key to trusting God in the storm is not looking at the storm itself, but looking to him. When Peter stepped out of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus, he was doing just fine as long as he kept his eyes on Jesus. But as soon as he took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the storm, he began to sink. The moment we shift our focus from God and start focusing on the size of the storm, we lose sight of God's power. We begin to feel helpless, overwhelmed, and afraid. But when we keep our eyes on God, we are reminded of his sovereignty and his ability to overcome anything. In Psalm 46:1, the psalmist writes, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. This is a powerful reminder that God is not distant or far away when we are struggling. He is right here, right now, offering his help, his peace, and his strength. When we face storms, we can run to God as our refuge. He is the one who will hold us up when we feel like we're sinking, the one who will strengthen us when we are weak, and the one who will bring us peace when our hearts are anxious. The storm you are facing may not be over yet. You may still be in the midst of it, wondering when it will end and why it's happening. But know this, God is at work. He is working in you, through you, and for you. He is using this storm to refine you, to teach you, and to grow you in ways that you may not yet understand. And even though the storm may feel overwhelming, God is using it to shape you into the person he has called you to be. You may not understand everything that's happening right now, but you can trust that God is good, that he is faithful, and that he is always with you. Even in the darkest moments, he is working on your behalf. You don't have to face this storm alone. Turn your eyes to him, trust in his promises, and know that he is faithful to bring you through. God is not only present in the storm, but he is using the storm to work out his purpose in your life. You may not see the full picture right now, but one day you will look back and see how God used this storm to build your faith, strengthen your character, and draw you closer to him. Trust him, even when you can't see the way forward. He is working, and he will bring you through. When you find yourself in the midst of a storm, it's easy to feel like you're all alone. The darkness seems so heavy, the pain so real, and the fear so consuming. You might wonder, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this trial? It's in these moments that we must remember that we don't serve a God who is distant or uncaring. On the contrary, we serve a God who is close to the brokenhearted, who sees our pain and who walks with us through every storm we face. Even when we feel abandoned or overwhelmed, God is right there beside us, working on our behalf with his love, grace, and power, ready to carry us through. It's important to understand that the storms we face are not a sign that God has abandoned us. Far from it. In fact, God is often working most powerfully in our lives during the hardest times. You see, God's work is not always visible to our eyes. It's not always immediate, nor does it always look the way we expect it to look. But just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. God is working even when we feel that He's silent. He's working even when we can't hear His voice, and He's working even when it feels like everything is falling apart around us. In the midst of our trials, we may question God's motives. We may ask, why is this happening to me? Or what did I do to deserve this? It's essential to remember that God is not punishing us. The storm is not a punishment for our sins, but a test of our faith. Yes, there are times when we face consequences for our choices, but there are also times when God allows storms in our lives to refine us, to purify us, and to make us more like His Son, Jesus Christ. The Apostle James reminds us in James 1:2-4, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." This verse shows us that the trials we face, though difficult, are part of God's plan for our spiritual growth. They test our faith, develop perseverance, and ultimately lead us towards spiritual maturity. Let's take a moment to reflect on the story of the Apostle Paul. Paul endured incredible trials throughout his life. Shipwrecks, beatings, imprisonment, and countless other hardships. But despite all of this, Paul never lost sight of the bigger picture. In 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, he writes, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." Paul's faith in God was unshakable, even in the face of suffering. He knew that God was using his trials to strengthen him, to deepen his reliance on God, and to prepare him for the work God had called him to do. And even in the midst of his struggles, Paul found joy and peace in knowing that God was with him. We can learn so much from Paul's example. When we face storms in our own lives, we must remember that we are not abandoned. God is with us, even in the hardest moments. And though the storm may seem overwhelming, God is using it to do something incredible in our hearts. He is refining us, molding us, and shaping us to be more like Jesus. We may not understand the purpose of the storm in the moment, but we can trust that God has a plan, and His plan is always good. There is a passage in the Old Testament that beautifully illustrates how God works in the midst of a storm. In the book of Isaiah, God speaks to the people of Israel, saying, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." Isaiah 43:2. God promises to be with us through every trial and storm. Whether the waters are deep or the fire is hot, we are never alone. God's presence is our assurance. He will never leave us or forsake us. He will be with us, carrying us through the storm, providing us with the strength and peace we need to endure. It's in these moments of trial that we experience the depth of God's love and grace. When everything else is stripped away, we come face to face with the reality that God is all we need. His love is sufficient for us. His grace is enough to sustain us, and His power is made perfect in our weakness. It's in the storm that we learn to rely on God like never before. We learn to trust Him, not because everything is easy, but because we know that He is faithful, that He is good, and that He is always at work in our lives, even when we can't see it. God's work in our lives is often most visible in the aftermath of the storm. When we come through the other side, we can look back and see how God used that difficult season to refine us, to strengthen our faith, and to draw us closer to Him. We may not always understand the why behind the storm, but we can always trust that God is using it for His glory and our good. The storm may seem long, the waves may seem high, but God's promises are sure. He will never leave you or forsake you. He will bring you through. And as you walk through the storm, remember this: God is not only working in you, but He is also working for you. Wow. The battle you're facing is not just against the circumstances, but it is also against the enemy of your soul. The enemy wants to discourage you, to rob you of your faith, and to make you believe that God has abandoned you. But God is with you, and He is fighting for you. The Bible tells us that God goes before us, that He is our shield, our refuge, and our strength. He is the one who holds us up when we cannot stand. He is the one who will carry us through the storm. The storm may seem fierce, and the battle may seem overwhelming. But remember this, you are not fighting alone. God is with you, and He is working in ways you cannot yet see. He is faithful, and His love for you is unshakable. So hold on to Him. Trust in His promises. Keep your eyes fixed on Him. He is with you in the storm, and He will bring you through. Trust Him, for He is always working, even when you can't see it. As we continue to walk through the storm, it is critical to remember that God has a greater purpose for our lives than we can understand in the moment. Sometimes when we're in the middle of our trials, it feels like we've been forgotten. We wonder, where is God in all of this? Why doesn't He rescue me right now? But my friends, we must trust that God is not working on our timeline. He's working according to His perfect will. God sees the bigger picture. He knows what we need when we need it, and He knows how to bring us through the storms of life stronger, wiser, and more faithful than ever before. In moments of difficulty, we are often tempted to take matters into our own hands, to try to solve the problem in our own strength, or to figure out a way to end the pain ourselves. But God is inviting us to rest in Him, to trust in His perfect timing, and to allow Him to work in His way. He is a God who will not allow us to go through a storm without purpose. It is in those difficult seasons that we learn to surrender, to yield to His will, and to place our trust fully in His hands. The Bible is filled with examples of people who endured incredible hardships yet trusted God through the process. Job is a powerful example of this. Job was a man who experienced incredible loss, his wealth, his health, and even his family. Yet through it all, Job maintained his faith in God. In Job 13:15, he boldly proclaimed, "Though He slay me, yet will I trust in Him." Job knew that God was good, even when his circumstances seemed anything but good. He trusted God's heart, even when he couldn't understand what was happening in his life. And in the end, God restored everything to Job, blessing him beyond what he could imagine. In our own lives, we may not always have the same resolution as Job. The storm may not end the way we think it should, and the restoration may not look the way we imagine. But one thing we can be certain of, God is faithful. He is working behind the scenes, shaping us, refining us, and drawing us closer to Himself. And though we may not always see the fruit of our faith in the midst of the storm, we can be confident that God is using it to accomplish His perfect plan for our lives. But there's more to trusting God in the storm than simply waiting for it to end. Trusting God means actively choosing to rely on Him, even when we can't see the outcome. It means taking every fear, every worry, every moment of doubt and surrendering it to Him. It means saying, "God, I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust You. I know that You are good. I know that You love me. And I know that You are at work in this storm, even if I can't see it right now." This is not a passive trust. It's an active decision to believe that God is faithful, no matter what. Jesus understood this kind of trust. When He was in the Garden of Gethsemane, preparing for the greatest storm of His life, the cross, He prayed to God, saying, "Father, if You are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but Yours be done." Luke 22:42. Even though Jesus knew the pain that awaited Him, He trusted God's plan. He surrendered His will to the Father's, knowing that God's purpose was greater than His own comfort or understanding. And because Jesus trusted the Father, He was able to endure the suffering of the cross, and through His death and resurrection, He secured victory for us all. When we look to Jesus, we see the ultimate example of trusting God through the storm. Jesus' life was one of complete surrender to the Father's will. He didn't seek to avoid pain or hardship. Instead, He embraced it, knowing that through the storm, God's purposes would be fulfilled. And just as Jesus trusted the Father in His darkest hour, we are called to do the same. But how do we trust God when we don't feel like it? How do we trust God when the storm seems unrelenting and the waves threaten to overwhelm us? First, we must remember that our trust is not based on our circumstances. It is based on the character of God. God is faithful. He is good. He is good. He is love. And He is always with us. These truths are unchanging even when everything else feels uncertain. Second, we must stay connected to God through prayer and His Word. Prayer is our direct line of communication with the Father, and it is through prayer that we pour out our hearts to Him, share our fears, and surrender our worries. And as we read His Word, we are reminded of His promises. We are reminded of His faithfulness in the past and His commitment to be with us in the future. Psalm 34:18 tells us, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." God is near to us in our pain, and He is ready to comfort us, strengthen us, and carry us through. Finally, we must surround ourselves with other believers who can encourage us and lift us up when we are weak. God never intended for us to walk through the storm alone. He has placed us in community with others who can pray for us, support us, and remind us of His faithfulness when we are struggling. When you are feeling overwhelmed, lean on your brothers and sisters in Christ. Allow them to point you back to God's promises and encourage you to trust in Him. Remember, the storm will not last forever. There is an end in sight, and God will bring you through. The Bible promises us that He is working all things together for our good, Romans 8:28. That includes the storm you are facing right now. God will use it to refine you, to draw you closer to Him, and to equip you for the work He has prepared for you. Trust that God is working in ways that you cannot yet see. And know that He is faithful to complete the work He has begun in you. When you are in the storm, trust God. When you don't understand, trust God. When you feel weak and discouraged, trust God. He is with you, He is for you, and He will never leave you. Keep your eyes fixed on Him, and He will bring you through this storm victorious. As we continue through the storm, it's essential to understand that the trial we're facing is not the end of our story. It is only a chapter. And though it may feel like the storm will never end, we must trust in God's ability to bring us to the other side. There is a deeper purpose to the storm, one that only God can see in full. We often focus so much on the hardship, on the pain, on the uncertainty, that we forget that God is not only aware of what we're going through, but is actively working to shape us in ways we cannot even imagine. In our natural human tendency, we seek comfort and desire relief. We long for the storm to pass, for the pain to subside, and for things to return to a sense of normalcy. But God does not operate on our timeline. His ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are beyond ours. And in the midst of the storm, He's doing something in us, something deep and lasting. Something that will not only strengthen our faith, but will prepare us for the future He has planned for us. It's often in the most difficult moments of life that we encounter the deepest growth. When we face adversity, we are forced to depend on God in ways we may never have considered before. This is what the Apostle Paul meant when he wrote in 2 Corinthians 12:9. "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me.'" Paul understood that in the midst of his struggles, it was not his own strength that would carry him, but the power of God working through his weaknesses. God uses our weaknesses to reveal His strength, and it is through our trials that He refines our faith. When things are going well, it's easy to rely on our own understanding and our own abilities. But when the storm hits, when everything feels uncertain, we are forced to look to God. It is then that we experience His strength in ways we never could have imagined. It's when we are weak that we truly experience the power of God. And that is what transforms us. Think of the story of the Israelites as they journeyed through the desert. God had promised them the land of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey. But before they could enter the promised land, they had to go through the desert. And in the desert, God tested their faith. They encountered challenges. They faced hunger. They encountered difficulties that caused them to question God's plan. But God was using the desert to prepare them. It was in that time of wandering that He refined them, that He revealed Himself to them in ways they had never known before. And while they may have wished for a shortcut to the promised land, the reality is that the desert was an essential part of their journey. Similarly, we may wish for a shortcut out of our storms. We want the pain to end, the struggle to cease, and the trial to be over. But the storm is often God's way of shaping us, of refining our character, and of preparing us for something greater. He doesn't allow us to go through the storm just to bring us out on the other side. He allows us to go through it so that we can come out stronger, more reliant on Him, and more equipped for the purpose He has for our lives. This is not to say that the storm is easy. It's not to downplay the difficulty, the pain, or the uncertainty you may be facing. But what I want to encourage you with today is that in the midst of your storm, God is at work. He has not abandoned you. He has not forgotten about you. And though you may not see it now, He is using this trial to prepare you for something greater. In the middle of the storm, God is working, and in His time, He will bring you to a place of peace and rest. Remember that God's promise to us is not that we will never experience storms in life, but that He will be with us through them. He will walk with us through the fire and the flood. He will not leave us or forsake us. The psalmist reminds us in Psalm 23:4, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." God's presence is with us in the darkest moments of our lives. He is our comfort, our refuge, and our strength. There is another promise we must hold on to during the storm. Not only is God with us, but He is also working in us. The Apostle Paul tells us in Philippians 1:6, "And I am sure of this, that He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ." God is not finished with you yet. The storm you are facing is not the end of your story. It is part of the process, part of the work that God is doing in you. And He will bring you through it. He will complete the work He has begun in you, and He will use the storm to make you more like Christ. You see, trusting God in the storm is not just about waiting for the storm to end. It's about understanding that God is doing something deeper in us than we may realize. It's about learning to trust Him in the midst of the uncertainty, knowing that He is using this time to strengthen us, refine us, and make us more dependent on Him. The storm may not be easy. It may feel overwhelming at times. But know this, God is not only with you, He is working in you. And when you emerge from the storm, you will be stronger, your faith will be deeper, and you will have a testimony of God's faithfulness that will encourage others who are facing their own storms. God is at work in your life, and He will never leave you in the middle of the storm. As we approach the end of this journey through the storm, it's crucial to understand that the most powerful thing you can do in the midst of your trials is trust. Trust in the God who has never failed you. Trust in His promises, and trust that He is always working, even when you cannot see it. Trust is not something that comes easily, especially in the middle of a storm. It requires faith, perseverance, and a deep belief that God is who He says He is, and that He will do what He has promised to do. You see, faith is not just about believing that God exists. It's about believing that He is actively involved in our lives, shaping our futures, and making all things work together for our good, even in the midst of life's difficulties. Faith is the assurance that God is present, that He is near, and that He is working on our behalf, even when the winds are howling and the waves are crashing all around us. It's easy to trust when everything is calm, when we are in control, and when life is predictable. But the true test of our faith comes when we are in the storm, when we don't know what's going to happen next, and when the outcome is uncertain. During these times, we must remember that our trust in God is not based on the circumstances, but on His character. He is faithful. He is good. He is good. He is sovereign over every storm. Just as Jesus calmed the storm with a word in Mark 4:39, He is able to speak peace into the chaos of your life. And He doesn't just do this for a moment, but for eternity. We can trust that He is working to bring us to a place of victory. And even in the storm, He is doing something eternal in us. In the same way that a sculptor carefully chisels away at a block of marble to create something beautiful, God uses the storms of our lives to shape us. He doesn't cause the storms, but He allows them for a purpose. They are not punishment, but preparation. They are not meant to break us, but to build us. God is using the trials we face to refine our character, to build our faith, and to equip us for the calling He has placed on our lives. If you're struggling in the storm, remember that God is not absent. He has not abandoned you. Just as He was present with the disciples in the boat during the storm, He is right there with you, holding your hand, guiding you through the darkest moments of your life. And while you may feel like you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, know that you are not alone. God is with you. He is near, He is working, and He is carrying you through. It's often said that the darkest hour is just before dawn. And in the midst of your storm, it may feel like the darkness is closing in, like the weight of the world is too much to bear. But hold on, my friend, the storm is not the end. The dawn is coming. The light will break through. And when it does, you will emerge stronger, more refined, and more dependent on God than ever before. The key to overcoming any storm is not about changing our circumstances. It's about changing our perspective. It's about choosing to trust God, even when we can't see the way forward. It's about lifting our eyes above the waves and fixing our gaze on the one who controls the wind and the sea. When we choose to trust God in the storm, we are saying, God, I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that you are in control. I trust that you are good. I trust that you are working all things together for my good and your glory. Trust is not a one-time decision. It's a daily choice. It's choosing to trust God every moment, even when the storm rages. And it's through this trust that we experience the peace that surpasses all understanding. This peace isn't dependent on our circumstances. It's a peace that comes from knowing that the God who created the universe is with us, and that He is sovereign over every storm. This peace comes from the assurance that no matter how hard the storm may be, God is working in us and through us. And this peace enables us to stand firm, even in the face of adversity. As you continue through your storm, remember this: God is not finished with you yet. The storm is not the final word. God is working, He is refining you, and He is preparing you for something greater. And as you trust Him, you will begin to see the hand of God at work in ways you never thought possible. He will turn your pain into purpose, your trials into triumphs, and your struggles into strength. And when you come through the other side, you will look back and see how God was working all along. You will see how He used the storm to shape you, to draw you closer to Him, and to make you more like Christ. And as you share your story with others, you will become a testimony of God's faithfulness. You will be able to say, I've been through the storm and God has brought me through. He has never left me. He has never forsaken me. And He has been faithful every step of the way. So, my friend, trust God in the storm. Trust Him when you can't see the way forward. Trust Him when the winds are howling and the waves are crashing. Trust Him because He is working even when you cannot see it. He is faithful, He is good, and He will bring you through. And when the storm is over, you will look back and see how He has been with you every step of the way. You will emerge from the storm stronger, more faithful, and more in love with the God who never leaves you in the storm. God is working in your life. Trust Him and He will bring you through.